All right. So this is Just Jump, Lessons for Wannabe Social Engineers by a recent wannabe social engineer. It's interesting. This was in my mind earlier because we were talking about pen testers refusing to do certain things. And social engineering was one of those things. Like on an ethical level, we actually had a few people that would not do social engineering because it required you to lie to people. And they just weren't comfortable doing that. So we
I
had
have
this one guy that just loved it. He was actually an intern for a while and then turned into like a junior pen tester, but he was excellent at it, just absolutely loved it. And yeah, maybe a sociopath, I don't know, but he had no quandaries lying to people and putting on that role. So yeah, interested to check out your
It's
talk, John.
almost like you've seen my slides already.
Oh yeah? All right, I hope I
Yeah,
didn't spoil
we
it.
addressed that.
All right. Yeah, it's tough. It's I know I get the adrenaline going anytime I have to do it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right, floor is all yours.
Awesome. Hi everybody, thank you so much. Great to be here at B-Sides Knoxville. Thank you for having me. Um, this is Just Jump, Lessons for Wannabe Social Engineers by a recent wannabe social engineer. I like giving this talk because it's one of the first things I kind of felt like I had a knack for within pen testing. Like I do a lot of pen testing, internal, external, social engineering, right, all that good stuff. But like I get super jazzed up about this just because it's almost like you're acting. You know what I mean? I mean you are acting, obviously, but it's like the closest you can get to that without there being any real like a director and a script and you get to kind of make it up as you go somewhat. I mean, there's planning that's involved, which we'll get to, but it's a super interesting topic. I really enjoyed doing it. It stinks because of COVID, it's hard to go on site and do this stuff now. That seems to be coming back a little, but I digress. Anyway, I'm a lead pen tester at Wolf & Company PC in Boston. My views are not theirs, right? Newish social engineer, so I've been doing it for close to somewhere around 3 years at this point. I am jsark983 on Twitter, and it's my first time here. Awesome. So why listen to this? Does SE scare you? Social engineering. As Adrian just pointed out, it scares a lot of people. It scares me, honestly. I mean, it should. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, but it's an exhilarating thing to do, and there's always going to be fear, right? Are you interested in this? I'm just not sure how to pave a path, right? I personally think that doing this. Philip was talking about red teaming. He was talking about getting it. There were questions about how you get into red teaming, things like that, right? This could be another avenue for you, right? If you're a good social engineer, trust me, red teams need social engineers. And not everybody is perfect and great at everything. So if you end up being good at it, that could be your foot in the door to other things. Not sure what skills are relevant, right? I mean, there's a lot out there. Who knows? If you're watching this, you probably are new to this and you're not necessarily sure what applies and what does not, what you may need to work on. If you are new to this and you've started, but you want more info, you were bored and this sounded interesting. All right, common misconceptions and falsehoods, right? They're onto you. Everybody always thinks that before they even get out of the car or approach the building or whatever, that they have this giant mark on them that says, you're not supposed to be here, you're a bad guy, right? You're a criminal, everybody knows who you are and you're gonna get caught, it's just gonna happen, right? Not true, for one. And to be honest, it's not the right frame of mind essentially, because the idea is you want to get caught, right? You want the client to catch you because that's how you know you're doing your job, and that's how you know that they have a vested interest in getting better over time. Is if you go back year over year and they're getting better and better, right? Another one, there's only one path for learning, right? There's a lot of different ways to go about this. You don't have to have like a certain degree or a certain technical pedigree necessarily to do this stuff. Oops. I already went over this. Getting caught is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, right? I mean, it's as someone who just kind of like, if you're a red teamer, right? You want to get caught, but you don't want to get caught because you want to be really, really smooth, like a smooth operator, but at the same time, you're also providing value to the client. You need to be uber technical, right? Another one. It can help, but it's not everything, right? And we'll get into this a little bit more. You know, when I started, I wasn't extremely, technical. And we had this is back in a time when we were still kind of like fresh on the block for performing these engagements for clients. And, essentially it was pave your own way, figure this stuff out. And, we kind of adapted and developed our procedures over time. But most of the stuff was, if you know how to use a call spoofing app and, you have a certain set of skills, which we'll go over, you can kind of, I guess, fake it till you make it in a way. I mean, that sounds bad, but I'm trying to think of a better term. The bigger the org, the harder / scarier the job. I personally do not believe that at all because, well, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're doing a pen test against a bank, right? That bank has, say, 10 branches and one main office that's huge, right? Let's say it takes up an entire city block in Boston or something. If I have to go to the branches, and let's say they're like, yeah, we want you to test, say, 3 branches. Okay, you're walking in that, unless it's a shared building space with other businesses and there's like a back door that you can get into the bank the back way or something, right? You're going through the front door and there's going to be a teller line right in front of you and you're on, like spotlight's on you, and it's, that first part is going to be make it or break it, right? Whereas if you're doing a test against like the main office, right, on that big city block, there could be so many different ways inside that building, right? There might be a lobby, it might be shared. Scanning somebody's badge for use later is probably going to be a lot easier if you stake them out at the Starbucks across the street, right? And we'll get into some more of that stuff. But the point being is there's so many more options and so many different ways of entry and ways of proving value to the client from that perspective, as opposed to just going into that tiny little spot that you're supposed to try to get into, right? All right, let's talk about some basic skills, right? What you may have now that definitely translate. Are you funny, right? Levity in any situation is obviously a good thing. If things get awkward, can you crack a joke or, break the tension in some way? Are you good at that? Can you engage people in conversation? This is a big one, right? I mean, you have to be able to talk, especially on physical social engineering engagements where you're going to interface with several people potentially. You may have to switch your story up. And being able to flow in conversation is going to be a huge bonus instead of being caught flat-footed and really not really knowing where to go in your head because you're not comfortable speaking. Can you look more or less approachable when you need to, right? Like, can you seem like you don't want to be bothered? Do you have a kind of a sense about you where you know how to make that, how to come off like that, right? Or are you good at, kind of like opening up your body language and making yourself appear more approachable when you want someone to notice you and you want someone to interact with you? Do you work well under pressure? I mean, like we kind of said earlier, like, yes, it is nerve-wracking, but it's also exhilarating. And obviously there's a lot of practice involved, right? In order to get more comfortable and not get as nervous, but there's always going to be pressure, right? I don't think there's a social engineer alive that's like, oh yeah, I don't worry about anything anymore ever. I'm never scared. I'm never nervous about how an engagement's going to go, right? Can you appear confident and weak when necessary? So this kind of ties into the more or less approachable, but like, can you, chest out, walk around like you own the place if the moment calls for it, right? Or can you kind of tone it down and look, a little weaker, not necessarily someone who's sure of themselves. Maybe that helps to, garner pity from one of your targets, right? So you probably do have some of these skills, you just haven't consciously put them to use yet, or you didn't realize that they were applicable. So getting started. So regardless of your experience level, right? Let's talk about things that could help you. Again, get comfortable talking to people. Smile at strangers, sounds weird. You'd be surprised how quickly that can open up a conversation, right? Strike up a conversation in a cafe. I mean, it's obviously easier said than done these days. Hopefully we'll get back to that. However, I think this is a big one, right? There's a lot of good practice here. Who knows? I mean, you might even make a new friend out of it, and social engineering practice aside, right? Gets outside of your friend group. You're comfortable talking to those people. So why would you assume that just because you're comfortable talking to those people that that's going to translate into talking to a stranger on site who's mad at you for whatever reason or is on to you in some way? Try harmless influence techniques on people. Now, I have some resources about this. These things called mirroring and labeling, right? So that's something that Chris Voss, who's an ex-FBI hostage negotiator, his book, Never Split the Difference, is a great book in that he talks about essentially in a nice way, kind of bending people to your will, right? So mirroring, for instance, is something where someone says, I'm really upset you didn't call me back the other day. Like, upset I didn't call you back the other day, right? So like it's kind of this way of like making them know that you understand what they're saying and that they've been heard, right? And it has this weird psychological effect with that person that, well, this person's really paying attention. They value this interaction. They value me, right? And then labeling, similar situation or similar thing where you're building rapport, you're showing empathy. Labeling is essentially when someone says that same thing, or probably, I'm really upset that you stood me up for dinner last night. So it sounds like you're really upset because maybe you don't think I value our time together, right? So that's more of that rapport building. That's more of that getting someone to feel comfortable with you and make them feel as though you understand them and you care about them and value the interaction or the relationship, things like that. And again, I'll have a book reference. Books, podcasts, Twitter, right? I think this is probably where a lot of people start and how they kind of, it's resources build, right? So it's like if you start with like, say, Chris Hadnagy's podcast, we'll get to that. Very well-known social engineer, probably one of the most well-known. He has a lot of different people on that talk about a lot of different things. There's a lot of resources provided, and it kind of grows from that. Where it's like, okay, I start listening to just pick one, pick a good podcast, and again, I have references, but pick one, start listening to it, and you will kind of the roots will kind of take place, and you'll be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to check out that book that person mentioned, or this person has another podcast, I'm going to listen to that one, right? And you start to slowly kind of get acclimated to the environment and how things work. Terminology, right? Things like that. Internships, right? Never too old, unless you have bills to pay. That makes it hard. But if there's an opportunity there and it works, right? And even if there isn't an internship somewhere for something like this, like let's say there's a security company that's hiring security staff on some like generic basis, and then it turns out they have a social engineering team. Maybe the social engineering team is overworked, or there's not enough of them, or it's fledgling. Maybe broach the topic of like, would you be willing to have me on as an intern as part of the social engineering team? I mean, part of this is social engineering itself, right? Because you're trying to convince them that they need you to do that, and that therefore you're getting that experience, right? But there's also just straight up internships that exist that you could probably apply to. And then once you have some, practice, write about it, LinkedIn, personal blogs, Twitter, etc. You're building out a case for your own enthusiasm, so that when recruiters come knocking or when you're job hunting, you can put these things down. Like, hey, I have a blog over here. This is my LinkedIn page. This is my Twitter. I'm active. I'm engaged, right? Like, I'm passionate about this. I know what I'm talking about, right? And over time, that builds up, and it could lead to job offers, or it could lead to better job offers, right? So that's kind of like if you're looking to get in. But what if you already have one, like a job in the security space, but not necessarily as a social engineer? Do they have a team? Some of the bigger security houses definitely probably have, well, I know they do, dedicated social engineering teams, right? Or people who specifically focus on that more than anything else. Ask them if you can help, right? With like open source intelligence gathering. That's a thing. That very closely ties to social engineering. Because before they go on site or before they start making calls or sending emails, they're going to need to know, okay, well, where are the entrances to the building, right? What kind of a street is the place on? what hours are they open? What's the general time people go to lunch? Maybe where do they go? Where do coffee breaks happen? When, right? So you can, that's something that doesn't take a ton of technical skill to do, but it also shows that you're a team player. It's a good way to get your foot in the door. And sooner or later, maybe you'll be asked to go on, physical site visits with them as like a support person or a fake point of contact, which we'll get into. It's just kind of like ways to show your interest, where they don't necessarily trust you to do the full job yet, but they want to see what you're made of. And this is a good way to kind of start. Logistics, I kind of just went over that. Point of contact, right? We'll talk about that too for a fake it at a jail free card. And honestly, like take somebody to coffee. Again, COVID are easier said than done, virtual coffee, who knows? But pick their brains, about what their day-to-day is like. Ask the people at that specific company that you work for what their unique engagements look like, because not every place is going to do things the same, right? There's going to be the same general engagement procedures, but there's going to be variance. So figure out what it's like there for them, and figure out maybe the gaps that they have, and what they need on the team, that they're the skill sets, or maybe something like that they're lacking. Because that can kind of set off a checkbox or like a light bulb in your head, like maybe I should learn that, right? Because that adds value to the team. So if I ever want to be on it, it would be good to have that skill. Oops, what did I just do? Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Here we are. If your company does not have a social engineering team, be the champion for one, right? What do I mean by champion? Meaning the person who wants to essentially set plans in motion to create that team, right? Be the one who is championing the idea. This is especially, in InfoSec, because if you're doing internal pen, external pen, if you do all that stuff, you can add value to places. You can add value for your clients if you have a social engineering team, right? So if you don't have one, talk to your leadership about your budding social engineering knowledge, because remember, you've been learning about it, you've been writing those blog posts, right? You've got all that background prep for this point in time. Create a formal proposal for starting a small team, right? So make it real for them. Like, you took the time to do this. You're using a certain your professional acumen to show that you're serious and that this is important to you, and it's important for the company, right? That proposal might have things like I've been on, or I know that we've been on jobs before where they asked if we do this, we don't do it, right? So it's like, okay, well, there's money being left on the table, right? So there are ways to entice management. And if maybe they're on the fence, or they want to try you out first, or offer to perform an assessment of your own company to show you have some skills, right? That could be something like checking for clean desk policy. Like, we haven't, finding out that there are issues where people are leaving like Post-it notes with their passwords under their keyboards, things like that. Now, do all this with authorization, even from your own company. It's another thing we'll get into when you're doing this stuff. But yeah, there's just be creative. If you have old doors, like prove why they're a risk, why one of the locks can easily be bypassed. And then maybe create like a kind of a formal report to give to management. Be like, look, like I have the skills. Look what I found. These are problems, right? So kind of make yourself create an air of importance around this idea, and you might be surprised where you get. So fear, we were talking about this, well, Adrian and I before the talk, but everybody, this is really front and center, everybody's mind with social engineering is the fear, right? Fear is not just when you're going on site. Fear comes in many different ways with social engineering. I think the easiest thing to do is a phishing campaign, but phone calls as well, right? They can be a nightmare. But the one thing that helps you overcome my fear is this: I'm being paid to be the bad guy, right? If I don't do it, and if I don't help that client realize where the holes are in their potential physical infrastructure, or their people with phishing engagements, phone calls, things like that, then the bad guy will do it for free and he'll make a lot of profit, right? And there's the bad guy, just in case you didn't know who that was. So remember, Adrian, this is why I thought Adrian read my slides. Unless you're a sociopath, you'll never be fearless during engagements, right? Like, I am still nervous before before any engagement, except for phishing, because there's like hardly any interaction. But vishing, so like phone calls, right? In-person engagements, going on site, right, to those clients. Yeah, that you get nervous, right? But preparation helps you deal with that. Fear is natural. Don't let it cripple you, right? This comes over time. Obviously, practice, right? Like I was saying, I hate vishing calls more than I hate physical visits. That's my fear, right? For some reason, I think it's just the fact that like when you pick up that phone and that person answers at the other end, like there's no body language to feed off of. There's no hints, clues, whatever that, any distractions. It's just you and them. It's a very binary back and forth, and you just got to be on. You got to have it together. Otherwise, it's not going to go well. You can always hide in the bathroom, right? So people were talking about Tinkersack earlier in the Discord. He has, I believe I have the link to it at the end of my slides. He has a talk where he talks about hiding in the bathroom for like 30 minutes to an hour after he got inside just to like decompress. I think he says I think it's him, he brings a Snickers bar, or maybe that's Brent White, I don't know. But they eat a Snickers bar for blood sugar, right? Just to like calm down, like get in the right frame of mind before they continue after that initial access, right?
I thought that was Jason Street. Was that Jason Street? Yeah, that hides in the bathroom. Yeah.
I think I say this not being 100% sure, but I'm almost certain I've heard it from multiple people. Maybe Snow in one of her presentations mentioned the same thing.
It wouldn't surprise me if more than one people use that same tactic.
I know, right?
let that adrenaline dump kind of subside.
Exactly.
Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. And again, remember, you're supposed to be there, right? You're being paid. There is a signed contract with your company, or at least there better be, that you're supposed to be there. You're not the bad guy, right? Like, don't like it's hard, but get that mindset out. More about fear. Confidence boosters in order to deal with the fear and help you feel more confident when you go. Sooner or later, those will be necessities, but as you start, right? Badge makers. For instance, there are what's what I'm looking for, not industrial, but like badge makers that companies buy for like $1,000, and they're just used to print whatever the company's logo, the person's headshot, any barcodes, whatever, right? Like on their actual like a piece of plastic, right? So like maybe like a like an HID card if that's what they use, right? But buy one, go online, or not even buy one new. Like I bought one for like $150, right? And basically to get it running, I had to buy a new ribbon and like one other part. And for a combined $200, I have a working badge maker for any engagement that I need it for. And I say it's a confidence booster because if you walk in the front door and everybody's wearing that badge and you're pretending that you're supposed to be there and you work there and you're not wearing one, that's going to call you out, or that somebody might call you out, security, whatever. But if you have one, people are not even going to look twice at you. So that can help. Proxmark badge cloners, right? Everybody's heard of the super sneaky scan thing that people put in a bag and brush up against an employee as they're going on their Starbucks break. And now you have, a copy of their badge, and you can use the badge into the building, right? Bonus points if you're using a badge that you've made with your badge maker, which is also an HID card, and you can use to scan into the building, because now you have like real, lead cred, so to speak, and most people are not going to question you. Practicing with your bypass tools, right? I've heard social engineers say that with bypass tools meaning like all encompassing, not just lockpicks, but like actual tools. They're not lockpicks that will help you like get into breaker bar doors from the outside. I have one of those. The under the door tool you may have heard of, where you stick it under the door and you pull the thing on the handle on the other side, the latch on the other side, and it opens and you can get in, stuff like that. If you have any of those, practice with them so that when the time comes to use them, you're not fiddling around, right, nervously, like wiping sweat off your forehead, hoping somebody doesn't come down the hallway. One thing about lockpicks real quick, I would say they are not necessarily a tool that you're going to be reaching for very often, in the sense that if you are doing this during business hours and you're standing there trying to pick a lock, while people are walking around, it's not a good look, right? However, maybe after hours, if you're allowed to test, and it's, wherever it may be, probably not gonna be a bank, but let's say it's a warehouse or, for some company, and there are file cabinets, that's different. Maybe that works. You have all the time in the world potentially to try to pick that lock and get in there if no other methods work. Brent White, I brought him up before. One of his favorite go-to tools for bypasses is a piece of plastic you can buy for a few bucks from a company called Sparrows, right? And so basically it's a strong but thin piece of plastic. If you buy the kit, they come in like varying levels of density, but you can cut them and then basically like shim them into a doorway in between the latch and the door, the door frame. And if the lock is not installed correctly, you can just push that lock in and pull the door open, right? I think one of his talks he mentioned he probably used that more than any other bypass tool. So don't always think you're going to be picking locks and all this crazy stuff, but like be ready to go with some of those bypass tools. And it'll definitely help you with your confidence when you see that door. You're like, yeah, no problem, I can get into that. Fake business cards, right? So you've got your badge, you've got potentially a badge cloner. How about a business card, right? To go with it. It's like 10, 15 bucks, I think, at I can't remember the name of the company now online, but it's like Vistaprint, I think. Like 10, 15 bucks to make like 500 business cards. And that you can put like whatever logo you want on them, your name, make up a fake certification you have. Maybe you're going in as like a network tech or something like that, right? Carry one of those. Like it's just another piece of evidence that you belong there and you are who you say you are, depending upon your pretext. All right, let's keep going. Heavy metal, that's my last one. Like on my way to a client in the car, like to get myself jazzed up. It doesn't have to be heavy metal. It could be, whatever you listen to get yourself amped. Like heavy metal does it for me. There's something like a little Iron Maiden or Slayer or whatever to get you jazzed up to walk into a bank when you're not supposed to be there technically. Planning and when not to. So, I mean, maybe this is going to be a controversial statement, but what I'm about to say, but fear leads to overthinking, right? Which in my opinion leads to over planning, right? Which leads to failing. So what do I mean by that? Imagine the following scenario. Your pretext to go on site, if you're doing a site visit, is as a firewall technician, right? Somewhat common. The goal is to get in the server room, prove you were there, which basically a lot of people just leave like a business card, right, to prove that they got in there. And then you've rehearsed every possible question, interaction, etc. Right? You've planned, like everybody that works there. You're on LinkedIn, like who you're gonna I'm gonna encounter Marcy here, Bob here, right? Like you've got this all down. You performed your OSINT, right? Like I said, and you know that Mike L is the network admin. So you expect a conversation with a receptionist when you walk in to go like this. She said, "Hello, can I help you?" "Yeah, I'm with Super Secure Firewall Company. I'm here to perform the annual inspection of the device. I need access to the server room for about 5 minutes." "Cool. Who's your contact here?" "Oh, I spoke with Mike L today. He said to let you know why I'm here and that he'll check in with me after the inspection." "Mike L hasn't worked here for 3 months. Uh-oh, right? So you did a lot of planning, but you missed this part. All you were planning on doing was encountering this receptionist, and you had your contact name, which was Mike L, and that was going to be your way in, right? Panic ensues. You hadn't planned on this happening, right? So you pause, stutter, can't pivot. Receptionist subconsciously picks up on this, right? So now she's suspicious, and you're likely blown, okay? Game over. So what I take from that is, and we'll go over this, but just like high level, I think that, and like I said, it's controversial as people work differently, but from my perspective, I like to know the broad strokes of who I may encounter, right? What the place looks like, the entrances, the exits. If you're a social engineer, they could be the same thing. General understanding of where I'm going and who I may interact with, and what my pretext is going to be, right? I personally feel like if I overstudy, if I plan for what I think I'm planning for every contingency, right? Like I feel like if I do that, I'm not able to flip it, when it needs to be flipped, flip the script when it has to be done, right? And I have some examples here. So what I don't like to do is rehearse expected conversations verbatim, right? like, oh, like this is how it's gonna go. She's like, this person's gonna say this, and then I'll say this, and blah blah blah, right? Don't plan your exact movements, right? From like location A, B, C, right? Like I'm gonna get out of my car, I'm gonna go to this door, which I know is likely to be open, then I'm gonna go over here, right? I would say, generally speaking, know the doors, right? Know your general idea for your primary goal of attack, right? So what happens if, the reason for that is, what if you're like, okay, my plan is A, B, C, but you miss in between A and B that there is a door that somebody just came out of for a smoke break that they propped open and then walked away, right? So if you have this like this tunnel vision into what your plan is going to be, and you've overplanned the hell out of it, you're going to miss that, which is potentially a much better way in than the way you thought you were going to get. That you thought you were going to get in, right? Planning to go through the front door means you missed it when someone came out the side. Don't only bring gear for one pretext. Now this is heavily like situational, right? Like if it's a small engagement, you may only need gear for one pretext. Depends on the budget, right? Things like that. But if you have a lot of time, if it's a big client, like I said, maybe there's that like downtown Boston giant office space. Maybe your roof is a construction worker. Maybe that all of a sudden isn't going to work anymore, right? Maybe then your next one is the firewall tech, like whatever it may be. Like have a few things, and in the back seat, right? Like I want to like 3 or 4 different ISP and technical company like polos with their logos on it, with my name embroidered. It says that I have a CCNA. I don't even remember what that stands for at this point, but I have one. Who's going to question me on that, right? So be ready, essentially. Don't panic and do something out of scope, right? And we'll get to scope in a second, but the last thing you want to do is freak out and then do something out of scope that's potentially even illegal. What you do want to do when planning is passive and active recon, right? And kind of what I mean with that is passive is the stuff that where you're not touching, and you kind of hear about this with different types of pen testing, but you're not touching, you're not actively interacting with the client's property or the client systems, right? So you're on Google Maps or something, and you're like doing the virtual go down the street each way around the building to see from different angles where doors are, things like that, right? Active would be more of like you're going on site, and maybe like they have a shared building space and you're in the lobby, walking through the lobby, kind of seeing when people come and go, seeing when lunchtime typically, I mean, lunchtime's always around 12 typically, but seeing, what the general flow is, how security is, are they lax, are they super stringent, how do the turnstiles work, are there, man traps, things like that. Man trap being like you literally physically can only go into the building one person at a time, right? There's no like, oh, hold the door and 17 people come through with no attribution, right? That's a little bit more active. I would also say actively communicate your ideas with your points of contact, which we'll get into. Points of contact being the people who have promised that, I have a story about that, have promised that they are going to be available if things go sideways, and they work at your client and are going to vouch for the fact that you're supposed to be there. You're not just some like bank robber or something like that, right? Do settle on a pretext that fits your engagement, right? You're not going to go in, excuse me, you're not going to go into, say, like let's say you're doing an engagement against a firewall company, right? Like you're going in and you're going to try to get into their server room. Well, your pretext isn't going to be as I don't know, something not related to, I'm blanking right now, but something not related to that, right? Pizza guy always works everywhere, right? Who doesn't want pizza? Flowers might work. Those things are generally pretty generic, and the pizza delivery thing specifically is very easy to get in the door. Things that get a little bit more in the weeds of like, they have potentially only one purpose to be here, right? Like there's sometimes harder to wiggle your way out of to transition into something else. So just all that to say, make sure that whatever you're going in as, makes sense. Maybe that's worked out with your points of contact and your client beforehand, like if they have a pretext they want you to use, right? But if you have carte blanche, use it wisely. Have all your phishing campaigns set up. all of your call pretexts kind of, set, like, like what you're going to call as, have the phishing campaign ready to go, literally like hit play, and it just sends them when you want them to send them. You're not trying to fiddle with that while you're on client time. Have your physical equipment ready, like if you do have badge cloners, whatever clothing, right, all that good stuff, have it ready. And then have basic answers for 3 types of likely questions you're going to get, right? Not specific questions, but the likely types of questions. So I say who, what, where. So who are you there to see, right? Don't have just one name, not just Mike L, right? Who are you there to see? Who do you generally know that works there? So you're not just, like I said, you're not just like, tractor beam on like one person. You've got several people to play off of in your head, right? You have a general understanding, you have a general knowledge of who's going to be there. What are you there for? Make sure you know that. Whatever your pretext is, you better have it worked out in your head so that it makes sense. Again, like you're not going to go into the firewall tech and say, hey, I brought pizza. It doesn't make any sense, right? So have that down for sure. And then where? Like, where are you supposed to go once you're inside? First of all, part of that is going to be in the planning stages with your client points of contact. What do they want you to do? Maybe they have an idea like, I want you to get access to X room, or this file cabinet, or the server room, whatever it may be, right? Have a general idea of, if you can, based on like if interior pictures of the building that you find on Facebook or Google or something like that, know generally where you're going once you get inside. Sometimes that can be hard. But at a minimum, know what you're trying to get to, right? And then do mentally preload your pretext, right? So like if you're going as a certain type of character, how are they going to generally behave? The pizza guy is not going to be angry on his cell phone yelling at fellow employees, right? That doesn't make any sense. Like, what's the pizza guy? He's gonna be happy, jovial, walk with a pep in his step. Like the personality kind of has to fit, the what you're giving off, right? Be comfortable using them, but again, like be ready to pivot if the time comes. And have you get out of jail free letters ready. We're gonna get to that. So what to bring? Engagement dependent. Your real get out of jail free letter. So what this is basically if everything goes south, you don't think you can pivot, spin your way out of something, like you're blown, right? And this comes with time. Like when you're new, you're going to give up like this. Then you're going to realize you can push it and push it and push it. And like there's a line somewhere, and it's just like intuitive. You're going to figure it out. And when you get to that line, you have your real get out of jail free letter. And this basically is a signed document with points of contact on it, signatures, everything you can do to make it look official that says, hey, I'm so-and-so from the company. This person is helping us do assessment, a physical testing assessment, right? Thank you for doing the right thing. You did what you were supposed to do. If you have any questions, call me. And the whole point is so they don't call the cops, right? Or something worse. So definitely have those. Again, engagement dependent. I'm sorry. If it's a small engagement, maybe you don't need them. Work it out with your points of contact beforehand so that obviously they know to be ready if they do get that call. But yeah, I mean, it depends on the engagement. And then your fake get out of jail free letter. So this is like kind of advanced, right? This is the one where it looks very similar to the get out of jail free letter, but the point of contact on the bottom might be the name of somebody who works there, but the phone number that's going to be answered on the other end is your helper on this engagement that's going to pretend to be that person and say, yes, they belong there. Now let them go wherever they need to go and please escort them there, right? The problem with that is, and if I didn't explain that well, I will in the questions if anybody has one, but the problem with that is you better be good enough to, if they don't like that, hand them the real one and get them to believe that that one is actually the real one, right? So again, use with caution, be comfortable. I wouldn't say on your social engineering engagement you break these things out, but it's something you can use. I have tried it a few times. The one time I did, they bought it, and then my point of contact forgot they were supposed to be the point of contact. And they were like, yeah, no, we don't, we're this, but in my luck, I pulled out the real to get out of jail free letter, and they were cool with that. Like they were nice about it, but again, just be careful. Cigarettes, right? Just in case, remember that side door where people go to give a smoke break? Well, it helps if you have cigarettes and a lighter, right? That helps build rapport with those types of people. So when they're back on the way in, they hold the door for you to get inside with them. High-vis vest, right? So this is like construction, right? So like there's a lot of construction going on all over the place, especially if you're in, a city or a pretty well-populated area. Maybe that high-vis vest comes into handy if your other pretext, if you get there and for some reason it's not going to work, but you have that high-vis vest and there happens to be construction going on, right? Or maybe there isn't construction going on, but if you can look like someone who's supposed to be there to do something in unauthorized areas, to fix an elevator, to fix a whatever, right? Like people are going to not necessarily give you as much of a second look as they would otherwise. Plastic door shims, I mentioned these. So like Sparrows makes a kit. They have a lot of bypass tools, pretty good quality ones. Call spoofing app. There's a few out there. Some work better for Android or iOS than others. What that is basically pretty self-explanatory, I guess. I mean, you can just say, this is the number I want to appear that I'm coming from, and this is the number I want to call, and that's what they see on their caller ID when they answer the phone. GUI-based phishing tool. There's several out there. Lucy is paid. Go Fish is free. There's others. It can help you with phishing campaigns. These days, it's getting harder and harder to get phishing campaigns landed in people's inboxes. So with us, I know we're going to have to start pivoting to, using the cloud, right? Like Azure, things like that, in phishing engagements, which have other baked in kind of like trusted features that a lot of people are going to let through by default into their inboxes or past their servers. And pizza, right? Who isn't going to hold the door for you? If that's your roost, like if that's what you've landed on, I mean, like I said, engagement dependent, but who's not going to hold the door for you if you have pizza or any kind of food, donuts, like things, anything like that. Business cards, real and fake. I mentioned those. The real one for if you do get into, say, the server room, like you're going to put those, about the place to prove that you were there. Fake ones if somebody asks and you're not blown and they just want to verify who you are. So that's your fake card. Maybe you say you work for, I don't know, Verizon or something. You have that Verizon card. The real one would be, my Wolf and Company business card that I leave in the server room. What not to bring, this. In all seriousness, this is not engagement dependent. Sometimes I've heard of people being like, I'll bring like, not like a gun or, a specific weapon, but like, oh, I've got my, a pocket knife with me that I always carry. Like, don't always carry it there. Don't bring it. You don't want weapons or anything that could be construed as a weapon on your person if you get caught. Like, it's just not a good look. Don't do it. What else? Seriously though, yeah, weapons, excess gear, right? Travel as light as you can, given the engagement. Any illegal tools in the state you're operating, right? Or that break federal law. The federal law one might be a little bit more obvious, but there are certain states where lockpicks are illegal, right? So be careful. And then your staying safe checklist. Are you crystal clear on your scope with the organization, right? There should be no daylight, or as little daylight as possible, between you and the people you sign the contract with about what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, when you're allowed to do it, who you're allowed to do it to, et cetera, right? We do not want situations where the cops get involved, A, and B, if they do, that you can't prove that you're supposed to be there or that the client doesn't have a good way of verifying that to the police, right? Or whomever is asking, right? So the more clear you are, the better. Do you have multiple copies of your get out of jail free letter? You may end up having to give that to a couple of people. So make sure you bring a few. Double check with your points of contact that they're 100% available during testing. I was on an engagement where I had 2 different people tell me that they were ready and waiting if something happened. And then when I got caught, they called and they didn't answer. Also really not good, right? There are some places that literally build that into the engagement letter where if we get in trouble and you are not available when you say you're going to be available, you're going to be responsible for legal fees or anything else that happens. So this is important. You're going to be responsible, meaning the client. Are there security guards? Are they armed security guards, right? Good thing to know. If the building is managed, right? Like let's say your client, it's a 10-floor building, your client's on floors 6, 7, and 8, and the building's managed by a third party. Does anyone there know you're coming? Because, hopefully not, but if you get caught by just the security guards up front and they have no clue what's going on, that could be a problem. If you're blown, right, do not run, especially from the cops. Okay. Nothing says, I'm potentially a problem in a bank than if the cops show up and you just hightail it out of there, right? Like, explain yourself, remain calm. If you did everything right, you've got your letters, you've got your points of contact, you've got people at your own company that can vouch for you, right? Just play it cool as possible. I mean, I don't think the cops have ever been involved in anything I've ever done in social engineering, but God forbid it happens. At least you're prepared, and you maintain your cool. So that just about does it. I have a lot of resources here. I will put my slides, wherever people are putting their slides. I think on Sketch. I'll put my slides there in PDF form. But conferences and events, Layer 8, the Human Hacking Conference. Layer 8 in Providence is really awesome. It's pretty cheap. We did virtual this year. I did a talk there. Very good people. A lot of, very focused on OSINT and OSINT and social engineering specifically. Like that's their conference. Layer 8 meaning like the human layer. Human Hacking Conference in Orlando. That's relatively new. That's Chris Hadnagy's team. Social Engineering Village, DEF CON, right? Who to follow on Twitter? We've mentioned a lot of these people today. TinkerSec, Snow, Jason Street, Deviant, Social Engineering Inc., Joe Gray, that's C3P Joe. Previous talks and other videos, right? TinkerSec, I think this is the one I was talking about where he's in the bathroom. Transitive Trust, pivoting and escalating privileges in a social engineering scenario. That's a really interesting talk and it's really funny. That's online. I can't remember where, but you can find it if you look up the title. Excuse me. Deviant Alum, I'll let myself in. Tactics of Physical Pen Testers. That's a really interesting talk about bypassing all kinds of doors, locks, you name it. Jason Street, Brent Light, the list goes on, right? That masterclass, if you have a masterclass subscription, which is really interesting, it's kind of like little mini classes, 8 to 10 episodes, good production value. Masterclass, Chris Voss, The Art of Negotiation, based on his book, right? So I definitely recommend that one if you have a masterclass subscription, or if you can afford one, or you're thinking about getting one. It's definitely a one to catch. Books, Social Engineering, The Art of Human Hacking, Chris Hadnagy, right? Another one that recently came out from Chris called Human Hacking. Joe Navarro, also I believe FBI, what every body is saying about body language, reading people, right? Daniel Kahneman, that's a classic, Think Fast and Slow. The Social Engineer's Playbook, Social Engineering Science. Yeah, I mean, there's, like I said, Chris Hadnagy is like, the go-to for all things social engineering. Yeah, Robin Dreek's book, also ex-FBI. I thought I had more than that. No, I don't. I thought I had more learning, but whatever. There's enough there to get started. So yeah, with that, I think I'm ending a minute early. So this was Just Jump. Lessons for Wannabe Social Engineers by a recent Wannabe Social Engineer. I'm Joe, Wolf & Company. You can find me here, and thank you for watching. If there's any questions, I'll be around. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we've got, if you want to stick around for a minute or two,
Sure.
yeah, we do have at least one. Somebody said they were a professional actor for years. Should they put that on their resume?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was my reaction too. It's like, yeah, if you're going for social engineering, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had that skill to put on my resume as a social engineer. I mean, that's big. I mean, you know all kinds of things about acting, which is essentially what the job is, with like slightly higher stakes.
And my question is, have you watched Lupin?
I have.
Because he does so much social engineering in that. And it's so. Before I give my opinion, what do you think of the?
I mean, it's super. It's funny because like my wife and I watched it together, and when we watch like she's a nurse, so when we watch like shows when like some medical situation gets involved, she's like, oh my god, that's ridiculous. It's not how you do that. And I'm like, it's a show. Chill out.
Right.
Same thing when I was watching that. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like that's not. I mean, in broad strokes, yeah, that's kind of how it works with like the handoff of the stolen thingy, or like the the researching people, right? But then there are scenes in that where he's like got like all the pew like lasers and things going on all like 17 of his monitors. It's like it's a little bit overblown, but it's entertainment, right? It's a show. So you gotta take
but at the same time, aren't you like, that's what I do?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Better.
But for for more valiant reasons, I guess you can say, than stealing stuff.
Right. True enough.
So, but yeah.
All right. What are some notable social engineering firms who operate in this field?
Specifically, that's all they do? Interesting question.
Well, I mean, that's Chris's Head Nagy. His
Yeah.
company does specialize in that.
I'm gonna be really honest and say that aside from his, I'm not aware of too many that do strictly that. Like I've heard of a lot of companies that, I mean, there's a lot of companies out there that like do red teaming and they have a huge component, which is social engineering, right? But like not specifically just that. I mean, you caught me by surprise on that one. I don't necessarily have any other names off
Yeah.
the top of my head.
And honestly, from a market standpoint, I don't think it makes sense to specialize too much in it because people expect to buy it as part of a red team package, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not going to say, hey, let's do a red team, but let's farm it out to specialist firms and we're going to hire one firm to do social engineering, one to do the web app pen test, one to do the network pen. Like, no, you just want one shop to do that. Like
I think it probably makes more sense. Like I'm willing to bet there's, cloak and daggery operations that do those types of engagements for like government agencies, maybe. But I mean, I don't know of them, and I don't think many people probably do know about them. And what
that's a different market.
Do.
Yeah, than the commercial stuff. Yeah, that's not your average trusted sec or whomever. And I assume trusted sec does quite a bit, because they traditionally built some of the most popular tooling, the SE toolkit and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Was there a time where you were almost caught but were able to wiggle out of it at the last minute?
So the new part of my social engineering is that I haven't had a ton of close calls. I will say, and this is not necessarily me bragging, usually the thing that works is like over time you're like, wait a minute, I'm not going to get in trouble from my boss or from the client if I turn up the annoyance factor a little bit because they're not letting me do this thing, right? Or if I, get on my cell phone when I can tell that they're starting to get a little bit in like feeling shady about what I'm doing there, and pretend to take a call like in the middle of the conversation and be like, so for instance, there was one recently where I was saying that I worked for a construction company down the street. We had just burst a water main, and we were checking because the in order down the block to where that location was, all of the places were flooding, and there was like water coming out of the toilets and the drains. And nobody knows enough about like industrial plumbing, right? So like that was the ruse. And when I could tell they weren't necessarily buying it, I pretended to take a call. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm there now. Wait, are you telling me that the gas station next door, and I knew the name of the gas station because I knew this is what I was going to use, like they're flooding, the basement's flooding, and then like they start to pick up on that like urgence, and they're like, oh, he's probably joking, and I don't want to be the one to tell him no and then have it happen here, so let's just let him do it, right? So I've had that happen where that was kind of close, but never like we're about to call the cops situation,
right?
So I've been lucky in that aspect.
That element of urgency is useful, right? Like you don't want them thinking too much about the decision they're about to make. Yeah.
And if you can tell that they're going down that path, it's like I do feel like it's like a little bit of practice where it's like, or like having the quote unquote, gut/experience to know that you can do that and it's not going to get you in trouble with your boss because you were a little bit rude to the client or you're a little bit pushy or something. Like that's what you're there for, right? So unless you start screaming and yelling and throwing things through the window, I think that's a little different.
Yeah, there's a line.
Yeah.
What has social engineering looked like during COVID?
Ooh.
If it's existed at all.
A whole lot of phishing and phone calls. Yeah. I think I've done
non-physical stuff.
Yeah, I think I've done since COVID started, maybe 3 or 4 in-persons, like on site visits where it was, small bank locations and things like that. It was some of those harder ones where it's like you have to go to the branch and like fake, you're gonna make it or break it when you walk through that front door and there's a line of tellers staring at you. But yeah, it hasn't been great. I like, those are my favorites. I like the site visits.
Oh yeah.
They're the most exhilarating, right? They're the most fun. they make for the best stories, so.
Yeah, so yeah, somebody's, similar question. Somebody's asking how wearing
Right.
masks has affected it, because you don't have those facial cues and stuff. And it sounds like it's not an issue because nobody's on premises anyway, so you're not going anywhere, right?
Yeah, I mean that the few times that I've had to, yeah, the mask, obviously the mask was a factor, but I'll be honest with you, like in the moment, I didn't necessarily like think about how that might change the interaction. It was more of a, I'm gonna do my thing. I'm pretty sure I got my pretext down well. I'm pretty sure I have a good story. I've got the urgency if I need to if I need to use it. But to be blatantly honest, I really didn't put a lot of consideration into the mask thing. Maybe I should or should have.
Yeah.
Because it makes a lot of sense. It's a good question.
All right. I think if you want to pop onto the Discord, there's some more questions there. But right now, we need to bring Dan on and talk about the winners of the CTF.
Awesome.
But thank you
All
very
right,
much. Awesome
Pleasure.
presentation. Personally, an area that is just so much fun to me. I always enjoy hearing people talk about social engineering.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Have a good one.